Hey folks, Crimecast is powered by our friends at Kubota of Chattanooga. Whether you're looking to buy equipment for your farming operation or simply for your home project, they want to be part of your success. It's also supported by our friends at Optimize You of Chattanooga, the Vascular Institute, Alchemy Med Spa, the Barn Nursery, Reagan Outdoor, First Lead You Podcast, Buchanan Disability, and Our House Studios. Thanks again. Let's get to it. Crimecast, powered by Kubota of Chattanooga.
110710. Yes, sir. And they have the car stopped at 10th and Grant. You might go by there first. 323 to 584.
Welcome to Crimecast, a podcast centered around policing and the community. Cold cases, active cases, safety and insights, all wrapped in stories and entertainment. Plus, we're going to review infamous cases, talk with authors, other podcast hosts, and former and current officers and detectives. Hosted by Clint Powell and police veteran David Roddy. Get ready. Let's Crimecast. What's up, David Roddy?
How we doing, brother?
Good.
Good.
Yeah, here's my problem. I'm always told not to start recording before we go, time to record. But that's really where the good stuff is.
We roll around in it for a minute.
Yeah, we say, I think we get all the stuff we're afraid we might say. And then we all go, okay, is all the garbage out of our brains?
And I didn't look over my left shoulder. You were recording before I noticed today.
And I did, but I didn't get anything
wasn't long.
good. No, I didn't get anything good. I've used some stuff in the past that may be a little questionable.
I'm aware.
All right, so we've been wanting, you and I have talked about having a guest in here with this skill set and had this kind of experience for 3 or 4 months, and it's just a matter of getting schedules together. I'm going to let you introduce the guest.
Gotcha.
And then I'll jump in, and I kind of said this to set expectations. I will ask questions probably in a clumsy way, but because you have such a good relationship with the guest and known him so long, you can clean up what I'm trying to say sometimes. And so this will be a really good exchange. Who we got in the studio with?
So we have a gentleman that I've worked with, my entire career.
Right.
Malcolm and I together, I think we started the same time. Almost.
I started in 1991.
Yeah, so I was right after that in 95, and from then on it was this paralleling career of different assignments, patrol, you name it, but kind of really got together when I started my time on SWAT. Tank, as his nickname was and still is to me, got into negotiations. And as we spent more time through training and call-outs and everything just over years and years, developed a really reliant relationship on each other because the outcomes we were both trying, it was the same outcome but coming from two different directions. And I really understood that, and it transfers now to how I set up relationships at work, personal, everything else, where everybody's coming from a different direction, but you're all trying to do the same thing.
Right.
And having to do it in some very critical moments with Malcolm over the years was just, it was a really unique experience, and I still rely on the skills that I built during that time. Patience on Malcolm's part with me, because H&T and SWAT you can run in two different speeds at times. And
absolutely.
He was kind of the brakes and I was kind of the gas at moments, and then we'd flip that around on each other, and it was a really awesome experience. So
let me do this.
Honored to get Malcolm Kennemore in here today.
Fantastic. I was going to ask you about that because I have it written down, because you said sometimes we're in the same command center or same car, trying to get the same outcome but doing it completely different ways. I'm interested to figure that part out. I bet there's a lot of lessons from both sides.
Oh, there
What
was.
did you call him? Well, real quick, before I'm going to talk like he's not in the room. You mentioned command. So what's the program? HET?
H&T, Hostage Negotiation Team.
Perfect. Okay, let's remember. I'm trying to talk to the civilians.
World of acronyms.
Yeah, it is. It's LTPT. What are you? Let me do this real quick before we start going into the relationship part. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
How you doing?
Yeah, glad to be here.
Okay. When did you get into it? You said 91. Let's talk about why. Why in the world did you go into law enforcement?
Yeah.
There's got to be a why there.
Yeah, there probably is a why to it. Grew up around the military. My dad was in the Navy and retired from the Navy. So that was something I guess I felt like I always had to do. Mm-hmm. So went to the Navy right out of high school. Was in total with some active duty and then reserves for about close to 9 years, something like that. After the first 7, decided I just needed to look toward law enforcement. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, but at the time, my dad, when he retired from the Navy, he went into law enforcement, worked for TVA police until he retired from that. So all of that probably shaped it a little bit.
Yeah.
But honestly, when I started, I wanted to be a park ranger. I just love outdoor things. I spend all of my time that I can. Like I know David hunts and stuff like that. I don't hunt at all. I don't fish. I have been hunting. I have been fishing, but I don't hunt and I don't fish. But I love being in the woods. I'm hiking all the time, backpacking, mountain biking constantly. Those are just the things I love. So I just wanted to be a park ranger. So went and talked to national park rangers, state park rangers. I had a degree in criminal justice, just a bachelor's degree, and all of them said, oh, that's great, but you have to have experience. So I went to Chattanooga Police to get experience. Now it's not like that anymore. Everybody has trouble recruiting now, but back then, you had to have it. So I kind of went to Chattanooga Police just to get that experience.
I've got a friend that's a park ranger now. I ran into him and I'm like, you get to carry a gun and everything? He's like, yeah, man, we big boy job and everything, Clint.
Yeah,
like,
national park rangers have a lot of different things. Like they can be interpretive rangers, they can be
Yeah.
law enforcement rangers. I wanted to be on the law enforcement side, but I really went to Chattanooga Police to get some experience to move on to something else.
Did you grow up in Chattanooga? Were you from Chattanooga?
So grew up in my earlier years in San Diego. My dad was in the Navy. We were there. Came here early, finished high school here, and then when I went in the Navy, first place they sent me was back to San Diego. Actually,
What high school did you go to here locally?
North Sand Mountain, which is not here in Chattanooga. It's in Alabama.
Yeah, my dad grew up in Trenton.
Okay.
So he grew up playing in that area.
Yeah, that was the area that my mother's family was from. So
Yeah.
that's where we moved to when my
To
dad
this
retired.
day, if you drop my dad's name in that community to the right people, they're either going to, or they're going to go, oh.
Right.
It's one of the two. All right, so you get in the Chattanooga Police Department, and how long before you started going, because you didn't stay as a patrol officer, of course. You went to, how did you get into the hostage negotiation stuff?
A series of events, I guess. So I was a patrol officer, worked in what we called Fox Team at the time, which was kind of like the high crimes area, like really busy, working night shift. Was absolutely loving it. And kind of to go back, I thought, I want to do this for a few years, get some experience and move on. But I could say like the first day that I really worked patrol on my own, it's like, I am never leaving here. Yep. Yeah, it was amazing.
Really? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was just the absolute greatest experience. It was just so much fun, just enjoyed every minute of it. I mean, I could say for working there many years, there was never a single day that I got up and said, man, I got to go to work today.
Yep. Wow.
It was like, man, I get to go to work today. It was great. So kind of the hostage negotiation team, I just wanted to do more. Just thought, man, I love this so much. I want to do more. So when I got enough time in with the department, they had openings on the SWAT team and the negotiation team same time. Mm-hmm. And the reason they had openings at the time was building up for the 96 Olympics. When the 96 Olympics, the Summer Olympics were in this area, they were in Atlanta, but they had all of the whitewater portion on the Ocoee River. So they were building up, putting some more spots on the SWAT team and the negotiation team because that got tasked with providing those services to the Olympics for that. So I applied for both of them, took the SWAT part. There was a physical test and then an interview, and negotiation team, it was just an interview. Mm-hmm. So I took the physical test for the SWAT part, passed that, went to the interview for SWAT, and I think it was the very next day I went to the interview for the negotiation team. And negotiation team picked me right then. That day they called me back and says, yes, we want you on the team. Kind of what pointed me into that direction. This is kind of a weird story, but there was a guy that was threatening to jump off the South Crest Road Bridge. And for those not familiar, there's an interstate that runs through the middle of Chattanooga, and there's a bridge that goes over this interstate. It's in what we call the Ridge Cut. It's a very tall bridge right there. It's a high traffic area on the interstate, lots of wrecks there, pretty bad area. So there was a guy trying to jump off or threatening to jump off of this bridge. One of the other officers that I worked with was up there and said, hey, does anybody know this guy? His name was Billy Ray. Does anybody know this guy? And he put out his last name. Won't put it on the radio here, but he put out his last name. And I said, yeah, I know Billy Ray. I've put him in jail several times. Yeah, I can't stand the guy. Horrible guy. Tried to kick out my windows a couple of times in the police car on the way to jail.
Relationships are built different ways.
They are, absolutely. Yeah. So I said, yeah, I know Billy Ray. And he says, well, he's up here. He's threatening to jump off the bridge. And would you come up here and talk to him? I said, no, I'm not going up there. The guy hates me. He's going to jump off the bridge. He sees me walk up. So he's like, well, he's not listening to me. Come up here and talk to him anyway. So I went up there onto the bridge and just started talking to the guy. He's kind of hanging half off the bridge. And honestly, I sat down on the curb and I talked to him. I was probably there for a couple hours talking to the guy. And eventually he just kind of came off the edge of the bridge, came out in the middle of the road. He never fully put his hands up and said, okay, I give up. But he came out in the middle of the road and he stopped, and he was there enough where he knew we were going to be able to just take him into custody. So they did. And it was just like, wow, that was interesting. How did I do that?
Well, I want to kind of pause as we go through the conversation. How stressful do you look back on that? You weren't a negotiator at the time.
I was not.
So
no, I was not a trained negotiator.
The strain of what I'm saying next and making sure it is spot on, I can't imagine that kind of. I've done a lot of sales and spoken in front of people.
Yeah.
And there's pressure. I can't imagine adding the consequence now is this person's life and the people around me. Mm-hmm. Are you even considering that at the moment? Or are you just so focused in on the next word you're saying?
Never even considered it at the moment. I mean, later you think about it, but and Dave can probably speak to this too. When you're involved in some incident, whether it's something like that or whether it's something that's really dangerous, you got people shooting at you or things like that. It's never occurred to me to be afraid at the moment. Never once has it ever crossed my mind.
Afterwards, you're like, what the hell?
Afterwards, you're like, what did I just do? What was that all about? But it's never even occurred to me. That's not like trying to be some macho thing. It just never crossed my mind.
What's the adrenaline in the moment? So I can imagine. I'm just keep putting myself retrospect, right? I'm not sitting there. I'm looking on it going, that's a lot of pressure. Yeah. That's a lot of pressure. Before we keep moving on the timeline, I got to ask how you got the nickname Tank.
Yeah. So most people think it's because I'm big, because I'm a big guy.
Yeah.
I was a lot bigger back then. I was in the gym all the time. I still go to the gym, but more cardio and exercising now as opposed to heavy weight training. But I was a big guy back then. Most people think it's just because of that. Really how this happened, working one night, there was a car chasing another car through downtown Chattanooga. Turns out it was a guy chasing his ex-girlfriend, but we didn't know that at the time. So eventually, he came up to where I was in the Fox team area. I kind of ran the guy off the road into a parking lot with my patrol car, which worked.
Yeah.
And the guy jumped out of the car. We both got out of the car. I'm going up to the guy real quickly. This wasn't really good sound tactics, but it was what happened. The guy jumped out of the car, put his hands behind his back. And as a cop, you're like, what is he doing with this, right? Mm-hmm. Turns out he was just tucking in his shirt, which was really a bad idea at the time, but he stuck his hands behind his back. And when he did that, I was so close to him that I just grabbed him, like bear hug kind of thing. Grabbed him, I picked him up. Again, I was a big, strong guy. I picked him up, kind of up on my chest, and I thought, I'm going to spin this guy and put him on the trunk of his car so I can get him into custody and see what's going on with him. And as I kind of walked down his car with him and spun him, and I tried to flip him onto the trunk of his car, I did not realize it was a hatchback. So it was just like a sloped kind of back of the car. So when he hit the hatchback, he actually just rolled off and rolled into the ditch. So where the tank comes out of, there was another officer that saw all of this happen, and he walked up to me. He was kind of a country guy. He walked up to me and he said, wow, you tanked him over that car, didn't you? Oh. Where he got that from, I have no idea.
And it sticks.
And it stuck.
There you go.
I mean, there are people, I'm sure many still to this day, that still work at Chattanooga Police and people that are retired, that if you ask them, hey, do you know Malcolm Kennemore there? They would have no earthly idea who you were talking about.
Right.
But if they say, Tank, oh, yeah, I know that guy.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's the way nicknames are supposed to be.
Yeah.
When you call them by their real name, it feels weird.
Yeah.
You go, Malcolm? No.
Yeah.
Is that
Not familiar.
Who's that?
So that's where the nickname came from.
That's a great
not just because I was a big guy, but I guess that kind of helped.
That's a great story. And just for time purposes, I want to kind of move into when you were accepted into the hostage negotiating team, right? Now, that was what, 295?
95.
95.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That process, the training on that, when you first got accepted, how was that transition over into that world?
Yeah, the training was fantastic. And to be clear, like the negotiation team as well as the SWAT team, these are part-time assignments. These are just additional things. It's not something you do as a full-time thing. Yeah. It gets closer to full-time when you get to be commander of the negotiation team or the SWAT team like David was. It kind of gets closer to be full-time like that, but still it's technically, for the most part, a part-time position. Great training. Back then, we had training through the FBI. We had to go to both a basic and advanced hostage negotiation school. So each one of those was 40 hours of training. So that was kind of the initial training. But then we have training twice a month, just like the SWAT team does, same training days. So it's basically 16 hours a month where we actually just sit down and train on negotiation things, principles of negotiations. We set up scenarios, just with the negotiation team itself. We'll set up different scenarios. We'll bring people in from the outside for us to try and negotiate with. And then sometimes we do big tactical scenarios with the SWAT team itself.
Were you pretty good naturally, did you find? Because some people are just more inclined to go through front doors, and some people, can have conversations a little easier. Did you find that came pretty easy for you?
It seemed to come pretty easy to me. I mean, I don't want to say that I was good at it, but it really did seem to come pretty easy to me.
Good at it.
I was going to say, you don't do it for 20-something years and start being a part of a leadership if you're not decent at it.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed to come pretty easy to me. And then other assignments that I did after that, later I was an investigator with Hamilton County Domestic Violence Task Force. So all I did was investigate domestic violence crimes, but a lot of that is interviewing, and you just learn to use those things through interviewing. Yeah, some of the same techniques you would use in negotiations, you use in interviewing. Yeah.
I'm imagining, this when I was talking about those lessons that you can flip over, some of the things that I teach in sales is like the power of silence and when to ask open-ended questions versus yes and no questions, those type of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is same as, and again, the consequences are much greater than.
Yeah. And there's a whole philosophy with that, with negotiations.
No, that's my fault, sorry.
There are some specific ways that you ask questions, and we try and avoid closed-ended questions for the most part. Hardly ever ask anything that could give you a yes or no answer. Yeah, so there are open-ended questions.
Yeah.
There's kind of a whole process we call active listening in negotiations, and you go through this whole active listening process.
Did you do mirror and pacing and all that too? Did you learn about is that a big thing?
Pacing is not one, but mirroring is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what we might call pacing something different.
Well, if you're talking fast, I try to either match that or I'll talk slow. It's trying to dictate the flow and how fast or slow I want it to go, depending on what the outcome is.
Right.
In sales, again, it's completely different because I'm trying to manipulate some stuff for different outcomes. So
yeah, all of that kind of falls into the mirroring part.
Yeah.
There's an acronym we use for what we would do in active listening and negotiations. We use this acronym of MORE PIES, and it's MOREPIES.
Okay.
And what that stands for, minimal encouragers, open-ended questions, reflecting/mirroring. E is effective pauses. P is paraphrasing. I messages. E showing empathy, and then S summarize. So it's a whole process you go through. Yeah.
Wow.
And you don't use every one all of the time, but that's kind of the mainstay of what we do. Yeah.
All right. And this is where it's going to get into story time. And David, you can jump in here. I want to, because we just don't have time to cover all this, and I want to make sure we get to what you're currently doing, because I find it a little bit like I'm getting judged, like I'm talking to a therapist, because I'm interested in finding that out. But when is a negotiator called out normally? You know what I'm saying? Because you said it's part time. I am curious in a city the size of Chattanooga, is that a weekly thing, a monthly thing on average? How often, and what's the threshold?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it varies. It varies when they get called out. Pretty much any time the SWAT team goes on something, they're going to have a negotiator with them. It could be just a SWAT team warrant service. They might just have one negotiator or maybe two. Yeah. Generally, there's a dozen negotiators on the team at any given time.
So you're going, even if there's not a problem yet, you're there in case there's
a... we started that as
wow.
I don't remember what year we started that.
Yeah, we didn't always do that, but we started it at some point.
I mean, so it's the fallback redundancy. I mean, you could be serving a high-risk search warrant, and then say your team's going up to just breach the door, go in, serve the search warrant, secure but the breach fails, or you're discovered before the breach occurs, and now you've got a barricaded individual. Well, if SWAT's serving the warrant, you've done a threat matrix to figure out, are they more than likely armed? Are they more than likely dangerous? Is their past history this? So it becomes a high-risk warrant. Well, if all of a sudden now you know the house you're about to hit has individuals with past violent felonies, they're known to be armed, all of these, and the breach doesn't happen, well, it's automatically on its face a barricaded gunman until they give up. And we figured out, if we're going to get ahead of that curve as fast as we can, we need to have one member of HNT with us at that moment to immediately start to try to establish rapport, assess the situation from HNT standpoint. They may not be the lead person talking to them at the moment, but they can be there to coach and understand, so that we're ahead of the curve if it does go to a full barricade.
Like try this, like say this,
or they may be on the, so that person could be calling into dispatch.
Yeah.
Now you could get a phone patch, or you could be communicating back to 911 to help that call taker find this out, get this, da 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 da. So we just found it was a much faster way to get around the curve.
And other times that SWAT team's not even involved, like when I mentioned the first time I dealt with this guy that was starting to jump off the bridge, back then the negotiation team really didn't respond to things like that. It kind of changed into that, where the negotiation team now would go to something like that. You may not even have SWAT response. It might just be some type of a suicidal thing like that couldn't necessarily be a threat to somebody else. So the negotiation team might go out and handle something like that. Some of it got changed as well some years back when we started the crisis intervention team with Chattanooga Police, which unfortunately I was kind of on the ground floor of that, actually starting that team with Dan O'Vaughn, who's retired deputy chief, was a lieutenant at the time. So we started this crisis intervention team where officers were trained to handle people in mentally ill crisis, that kind of thing. So sometimes they would go out on that now, so it kind of takes the negotiation team out of that sometimes.
You know, David and I, we've talked about this before. For years, it seems like police officers would show up, and back in the day, it's to protect and serve, right? Help me stop this. Those are the two things. Then it became, help me stop this. Also, I'm in mental distress. I didn't take my meds today. My kid didn't do my homework. I'm crying. Now all of a sudden, I'm not really just a police officer. I'm also a therapist. I'm a social worker and part-time negotiator. And it seems like a lot to put onto a police officer.
Yeah, and one of the things we've done with that is this crisis intervention team. And these are mostly officers that are working in a patrol function, and they get special training to be a crisis intervention team officer, and we get them certified in that. So we give them 40 hours of training to do that specific thing that's handling this. Another thing, I was kind of fortunate to be on the ground floor of this as well. Back when I went through the police academy, and probably when Dave went through the police academy, we didn't have any training in any of this. We had no idea about mental illness or handling anything like that. One of my assignments way down the road, and this was probably after I went to grad school and got a master's degree in counseling psychology, so I knew about these things. And then I got assigned to the training division as one of the staff instructors there. So one of the first things I did when I went to the training division, working there full time, is I went to the captain over the division and said, hey, we need to start some training in this. We need to train officers in this type thing. And he basically said, okay, fine, fix it, make it work. So I just kind of sat down, honestly, and started writing lesson plans. And I wrote tons of them. I wrote many, many lesson plans. Some of them they actually still use today. So I started going in with every police academy we had come through. I would teach them classes on abnormal psychology, handling the mentally ill in crisis, crisis intervention and suicidology. I've developed and started teaching them classes on this. So they got some training in that. And then we moved it to our annual in-service training as well. So officers started getting training in that. Now, depending on what year it is, sometimes the state requires that in your annual in-service training. But back then they didn't. There was no training on it.
Yeah.
Officers actually get training in that area now.
Well, I think that's why there's probably a generation of police officers that were kind of felt over their skis. You know how it is until the policy catches up with the reality on the street. There's a lot of people out there. You're both probably in the middle of that. You're being asked to do things. You're like, well, I've never been asked to. How am I supposed to fix your marriage? I don't know how I'm supposed to do that. And all of a sudden, now you've got training for it. So the new and upcoming folks probably have a little bit better bandwidth for that, I would think.
Yeah,
because y'all were guinea pigs. Y'all were trying to learn this in real life.
A lot of the stuff, when I developed these training programs, I looked at stuff that I did that I realized, man, I messed this up really bad back before I knew anything about it, before I went to grad school and before I really worked in negotiations or had any of that. I just looked at things that I messed up. And I said, like, how do I fix this? How do I train other people that they can do things better and do things differently?
Yeah. All right. Do you remember your first call you went on when you were the negotiator?
Oh, I don't. So many. So many things just kind of go away.
Well, we were talking about this. So I asked these questions, and I'm going to ask them anyway because you said that you don't remember. You were talking to your wife. You don't remember the things that went right a lot of times.
I don't.
On those first. That's weird.
I don't.
You and David have both expressed that.
Yeah.
It's the things that go bad.
Yep.
If I looked back to like my after action reports that I wrote, I could probably read 100 of them that it's like, well, this was good. But I honestly don't remember. Things pop up every once in a while and I'll think about it. But if I just sit down and really try to bring it to mind, I have no idea. I remember some of the ones that went bad, but the ones that went well, just like, I don't know. Yeah. I just don't really remember them.
How was it working with David?
I'll step out of the room.
Yeah, step out.
I'm not looking at him real quick. I'm just looking at you, sir. Let's focus like he's not. But I mean, in all reality, the reason I'm asking that is to start the conversation between you two about stories and working with each other. And then we're going to get into some lessons you've learned in relationships outside of work.
So fortunately, I've worked with several different SWAT team commanders. When I was both negotiator, assistant team leader, and commander of the negotiation team. All of them were amazing, including David. Started off, the first one was Mike Williams. Yeah. Mike Williams. I don't know if you've had him on your show or not.
No, but I know who he is.
Yeah, fantastic guy. Was over the SWAT team at the time. Amazing to work with. And we worked together a lot like David and I did. I can remember things like where he would come to me and say, so how is this going? How is this really going? Is it going to get anywhere, or are you just going to be talking around in circles with this guy for all night long? I'm like, I'll talk to him as long as you want me to, but I'll tell you, it's never going to get anywhere. And it worked well like that. We had a great relationship.
Well, at that point, this is why I love this. So at that point, is it on him, whoever's in charge, on Roddy to go, okay, you got another hour, and we got to go, or 30 minutes? How do you come up?
In my brain, it was almost like a seesaw. So when you get on, and that's my own internal, was when we get on the scene, first, SWAT has full control.
Absolutely.
Well, but our job is to get patrol out. We really don't have the control. It's 20, 30 minutes of controlled chaos of getting the patrol officers and others that have established the perimeter and they're working the detail and everything else. And now you're moving SWAT assets into their place. So if patrol officers are around the house, or you've got to get SWAT in their place. So you're doing this magician's game of switching people around. Once all SWAT's in place and you've actually kind of got it locked down for an inner perimeter, then the seesaw really tilts heavily to negotiations. SWAT is just holding. We're watching, and we're there to deal with it. If something escalates very quickly and it switches over to a full tactical. But as HNT begins their work, if that seesaw starts to come up and they're gaining a rapport, or the guy's shown movement, or he's talking more, and all these other things, you can start to see where negotiation is. And they can't see my hands on a podcast, but that's what I'm doing.
Picture a seesaw.
So it starts to tip. But when you come back to Malcolm's point of, because he would be in, we used to have a command vehicle that was completely separate. The front was tactical and the back was negotiations. But we couldn't talk through the wall.
You couldn't?
No.
That's stupid.
We could listen on radios, but see, they're in a completely
we made it that way
silent place.
intentionally. We thought about putting a door.
We almost put a window in it.
We thought about it, and we're like, let's not.
Because what's going to happen, and we even joked around, is we're going to put this window between the two of us, and they're in this very critical moment, and they're talking to the guy, and everything's calm, and then I'm going to go, what the hell are y'all doing? And I'm going to yell through the window at them and blow the whole thing up. So we're like, okay, bad idea. So what would normally happen is I would come out, walk around to their door, and gently tap on the door, and one of them would pop the door and be like, how we doing? Or, hey, meet me outside. And we'd both meet in the parking lot.
And talk.
And then we'd switch back to our separate areas. And to Malcolm's point again, come back, talk to them. How's it going? Hey, we've been talking for an hour, and we're really no closer. All right, so now that's tilted back over towards SWAT, which is, all right, well, we're going to start making some noise. We might drive the Bearcat up in the front, shine a light through the window. We might use a bullhorn on the outside. So we inject these different stimulus into the subject to see how he reacts with them.
To see if it can help jar it loose and get him to move.
Sometimes it works.
And sometimes it tilts back to where now he's talking more. Okay, the seesaw's back in Malcolm. So everybody hold what you got. Negotiations are back on. He's back on the phone. Everybody hold. And then it becomes back to them. And it's just that back and forth. Then it can ramp up to where we're 2 hours into it and we're no closer. We've done this back and forth. It's like, all right, well, now we got to go next, which is, okay, we're going to put some less lethal in there, and we fire some CS rounds or OC rounds into it. Area denial, we shut off one room. It's not meant to completely do anything, but it's let them to know we're not going away and things are getting more serious.
Right.
Maybe he talks a little bit more after that. So it's all that back and forth where we were constantly through a call out, hitting each other on the shoulder, or him coming to me going, hey, he's talking more. Could y'all make less noise? Could y'all not shine as many lights? And that kind of thing.
I have a question. When you this is a very naive question, but this is why I love this kind of podcast. When you come onto a scene, they say you're the negotiator. They hand you the phone or whatever it is. I picture the movies. We're going to talk about that in a minute, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, because I just want to see if he's the same.
You said no.
Absolutely.
I know that's where you're brain.
Damn it. Anyway, I'm curious: what is the first goal you're trying to do, and how are you initiating that? I am finding that is the most awkward thing to be handed the phone. There is someone that is pissed at the world, sir.
Right.
Fix it.
Yeah. And the goal to start with is really just to start building some rapport. And that's kind of the initial thing that we're going to do as a negotiator. Another thing we work off of, we call it the behavioral change stairway. And what we're doing with that is we say, to start off, we need to use our active listening skills, the things I went over before, the more pies and all that. We'll start to use some of the active listening skills kind of thing. using those active listening skills, we try and build a rapport with the person. And it's kind of like an us and them working together. Once we build that rapport, then we can start to have a little bit of influence on them. You're not going to walk in and say, hey, this is the way it is, do it like this way right now. You've really got to start those active listening skills, the rapport, have some influence on them. And then the top part of that behavioral change stairway is behavioral change. Hopefully they will change what they're doing, whatever threatening things they're doing. If they're just barricaded in there, hopefully the behavioral changes that they can come out, that kind of thing. So yeah, you just start from that.
Are they usually pretty angry when you get them on the phone initially? Are they, because establishing rapport sounds simple. That sounds very salesy, sir. I'm assuming,
exactly.
though, that if I'm mad at the world and I've got a gun and then there's people shining lights in my house, I'm not going to be like, yeah, I'd like a pizza. And if you could, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Sometimes they are angry, and sometimes they're not. Oftentimes what we find is they're scared to death. They're absolutely scared to death. They got into a situation that went farther than they thought it was going to. And they didn't, most of the time, and most of the things we deal with are not things where they set out to say, I'm going to make this a hostage situation. I'm going to start this like right now. It's like something went sideways on them. And that's how they ended up getting in that situation. And they're scared to death because they don't know what's going to happen.
And I'm assuming as a human being, even though I know enough police officers, that you do have to have a hard edge. You have to be able to do hard things. Yeah. But as a human, when you hear that in their voice, the empathy can be very real for you, I'm assuming. You're like, I feel bad for this person. I still got to do my job, but this person's in a position that they never thought they would be in.
Yeah, and it's true. Yeah, and that's one of the things you use. You're just kind of using some of that empathy.
Because that comes through when you talk to people.
Yeah, and it's you have to be, for the most part, genuine with it. You have to really care about what's going on. We would look at situations and say, like, well, what is our best outcome right now? Our best outcome is dude puts down the gun, walks out, hands up, takes into custody, nothing else happens. That's great. But we still have to look at it in other ways too. Say like, well, how do we define success in an individual situation? My goal was always, how do we define success? We redefine success in every situation, because that might have been the perfect case scenario. Person comes out, nobody gets hurt, everything's fine, they get the help they need, whatever. They go to jail if that's what needs to happen. But then another level of success, well, what if they didn't come out? But if they had somebody they were holding in there and we got that person out safely, well, that was successful, right? What if they didn't come out, but no officers got hurt in this, or no other people outside of this got hurt in this situation? Right. Well, that was successful also, right? I mean,
find your
kind
wins.
Of like, kind of the bottom layer of that. Yeah, but
have you found those things you just said pan off outside of the workplace? Defining success, active
absolutely.
Listening. Have you found the better you got at negotiating, you also got better in relationships outside, whether it's business or friends or
absolutely.
relationships?
So one of the things that I really saw with this, negotiations, all of this, learning about these things with active listening skills and doing the negotiations. So I was doing that before I went into investigations, before I became a detective with Chattanooga Police. And I can specifically remember, this is one thing I do remember actually, that I was interviewing a domestic violence suspect on the side of the road one night. It was over near one of the projects, and an officer had stopped this guy, and I needed information out of this guy. I needed some specifics, and I wasn't getting it. I was just trying to interview him. I was trying to talk to him. I wasn't getting what I needed from this guy. And I remember standing there, and it clicked in my head, well, maybe I can try some of this negotiation stuff with him. And I started using some of those active listening skills, and it was like 1 minute, and the guy just totally started spilling his guts to me. Everything. Really? Gave me so much information from that. So, it's like that worked. And since then, honestly, I apply that to everything I do. One of my later things that I did in my career and that I still do there now somewhat is doing like polygraph examinations and computerized voice stress analysis examinations. So those are kind of the technical process, but the meat of that is if I get something there that I need, I've got to be able to interview that person and get them to tell me what I need afterwards. I need to get specific like confession information or different things like that. Honestly, I use that stuff every single day. Yeah, always. I use it even my current job, working for Chattanooga State Police, and I'm a patrol officer there. I work with the behavior intervention team. Number of things that I'm doing there, doing like firearms instructing things. But Yesterday, I just had a call of a little 16-year-old girl on campus that wrecked her car. She was so upset. It trashed this car. She ran it over a ditch and down in an embankment. She wasn't hurt at all, but she was so scared. It was her second day of driving on her own. She just got her driver's license. Trashed her little car. She was so scared and so upset. And honestly, like I walked up, I saw this, and I just kind of went into that mode where I use these things to really like help her, kind of help her through the trauma of that. Later called mom. Mom came on the scene, was scared to death. Like, was my daughter okay?
Do it again.
Did it again with mom.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
use it every day.
It can be trained. That's the other thing. It's all soft skills when you start thinking about it, like listening. But these are things you can learn and get better at, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
How about you? Did you get good at this stuff?
No, I'm terrible.
Okay, that's fantastic. Good talk.
And I'm not saying I'm good at it by any means, but I use it every day and pretty much everything.
Well, you saw him work, Dave. So what? I guess my question to you is, I asked him what it was like for him to work with you. So what was it like for you to work with a negotiator like this? And then we're going to get into some fun stuff because I want to know about what you're doing now.
Okay.
The voice stress stuff.
The part that really helped was the fact that Malcolm and I kind of came up through the base layers of the team almost parallel. So when I was brand new operator, just doing the beginning SWAT stuff, trying to learn the job, he was getting it. He was on H&T, had been there for a little bit, but still that baseline position between the two, you developed a level of trust that as we moved into those leadership roles, we didn't have to relearn each other's mannerisms, what we were. We had great communication and relationship at that point, and it was we could take care of the things in like 30 seconds, and it wasn't a debate back and forth. It was an honest assessment. Where are we at? We're doing better. It's getting there. Need a little bit more time. That's all I need. Then I'll go back over and do it. It's the problem you can see on these is where, and you do have that Hollywood description of this thing where negotiators are like, no, and SWAT's like, we got to shoot at it and everything else, and they're not getting this relationship established, and you see this headbutting go on, and I've dealt with that in my career too, where you had different people, and it wasn't Malcolm that I may have been working with on something, but it was always a 30, 60 second, what do we got? We got this. What about this? Not now. Yes, now. We became the brake and gas for one another on how we handled it, and it worked exceptionally well on some very, very serious, silly things. Note
to self for our just people listening to us on audio because we're not on video yet. Malcolm smiled when you said no, not yet. No, we're shooting at it. That he kind of grinned at that because I'm assuming you've been on the other side of that. With people,
when the things happen and if a decision is made to make an entry or things like that, or when, like Dave was talking about, we're going to escalate to do gas in there, we're going to do whatever. As the commander of the negotiation team, I never make those decisions. Those are not mine to make. Those are his to make.
Right.
However, I can suggest things. And I have in the past. And
in a very polite
manner. Exactly. And it's kind of a work together kind of thing. So, you can make suggestions, but ultimately that responsibility doesn't fall on me. I don't make the decisions. I've never been the one that called on the radio to say, okay, we're going to make entry. I've never done that. That's their part of it, and it needs to be that way.
Well, you got to have your same mission, but two people doing different things. That's because you can't wear all the hats. You don't want to wear all the hats. You get you'll get foggy and you'll miss stuff. Okay, just naive questions. Is there a lot of demands for I wants? I want food. I want to talk to my wife.
Right.
I want a helicopter full of cash.
Not as much as you would think.
That's what I would ask for.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Really though.
Not as much as you would think. Like on TV, absolutely. On the movies, you see that all the time, but you don't really have a lot of demands like that. More when you really get into more of the demand kind of things, it's more related to domestic situations sometimes where they're saying, "Well, I want to talk to this person," or that kind of thing.
How do you know when to let that happen and not? Because that's the other. Wow.
Hardly ever. Yeah. We call those third-party intermediaries in the negotiation world.
TPIs. It's another
TPIs. For it. Yeah, TPI, third-party intermediaries. We have done it, but very, very rarely. So you don't
give into stuff like that. That's
very, very rarely. Wow. And we don't know what the point is of that. Like, okay, I want to talk to my girlfriend who left me. I want to talk to her so I can yell at her and hear her have her hear me shoot myself.
Yeah.
We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen like that.
And you don't know what the other person's going to say. That could
we
be
have no idea
Well, you
what
should have
they're gonna
slept with my aunt. All of a sudden, you're like, oh
You're
crap.
running the risk of putting the one thing they have the most emotional connection to into an already emotional situation. And to Malcolm's point, you have no idea what the subject's motivation is or how the person that you put into that communication link on the other side, how they're going to react to it. You don't know what they're going to say.
Right.
I mean, it may have been the worst, most horrible relationship they've ever had.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, sure, you can talk to your wife. And she gets on there, and this is just saying this out loud. She get on there and go, I don't care if you kill yourself or not.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you're done. I mean, at that point,
How do you come back from that?
Yeah,
Is there
exactly.
someone else you'd like to talk to?
exactly.
Who are you
Yeah.
going to bring in that person has a higher emotional attachment to that's going to
Yeah.
conflict what they just said? I mean,
Yeah.
okay, we're going to get your
That makes
mom in
sense.
here. I mean, what are you
That
going to
makes
do?
sense.
Yeah. So often we'll try and get that person there to the scene with us because we're trying to get other intelligence information from them. So we want to get those things from them, but we don't really use them for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The other part of it is if I can get them there to the scene, I can control what they do. They might have their phone with them now, and they're trying to call and things like that. I can control those things if I can get them to the scene there with us. So
And that's
we
what your
try and get
negotiation. Yeah, that's what your negotiation team's doing. So when Malcolm's talking, like 11 or 12 negotiators may come on the scene of the SWAT call, where I may have 30 something operators on there. He's got 8 or 12 negotiation team members that are doing the interview of the family member, or they're getting background from neighbors, or they're pulling up their
And they're
previous
handing you
police-
stuff,
and they're
and they're
giving
looking
intel,
at-
Yeah,
intel,
absolutely.
intel. Yep.
Don't go down that road.
Yeah.
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 And you're like, you got to that's a big trust. Because if they're giving you stuff in real time, whether it's you and David or you and your team especially, you kind of have to trust that in real time. If they're saying yes or no without I don't have time to be polite about it, they know something I don't.
Right.
I need to change course.
Yeah, exactly.
It can't be an ego push.
Yeah, one of the things we try to do when it's possible is we'll have whoever that primary negotiator is, they also have a secondary coach, and they're sitting there with them listening. That might be the commander, but oftentimes it's not. It's somebody else, another trained negotiator who's sitting there with them. And like myself as the commander, I can pass them information. And we always say, like, whoever's actually doing the negotiations, no one else is allowed to speak to them except for their coach that's sitting there.
What a
I
great
can't
life
go up
lesson.
I can't go up as the commander and talk to the guy that's actually doing the negotiations. That's one of the rules that we put in place, and we follow it. Yeah, I can pass it to his coach. Might be acting as his coach at the time if we don't have somebody else there doing it. But if I'm not, that information has to go through the coach to get to him.
Wow.
And he's listening to the whole thing. He knows what's going on. Sometimes I would give information and say, hey, try this. And the coach would say, we've already tried that. You didn't hear it. Or, no, we're not going to try that because of this. I'm not going to pass that to him. Okay. Yeah.
What a great life lesson.
Yeah.
And have that one person that's a different perspective, right? They're hearing stuff you may miss. They may
Yeah.
hear tone you're missing because you're so focused in.
Yeah,
They may be
absolutely.
watching your body language. I mean, imagine I'm watching him as much as listening to the conversation, my negotiator.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the things you do as the commander too, is you really have to look at those things and say, is there a point that I need to pull this primary negotiator and put somebody else in that place?
And so I was going to mention that primary negotiator it's not like a list that you flip to. Okay, Malcolm had it last call out.
Yeah, absolutely
Roddy's
not.
got it this call out. You're gauging, and I'll let Malcolm speak to it, but it was always interesting to watch how HNT worked, is who they picked as the primary. Was it a commonality in language or accent? Was it a commonality in just background and culture? Was it gender? Was it whatever? You carefully selected who that first voice was, because that's the voice they're going to hear for the duration of it.
Does it go to trying to get that rapport fast as possible,
'Cause,
right?
Yeah, similarities. It's the mirror, it's the physical mirroring part that we've talked about. You're picking that primary off of that as best you can, and then if that one's not working, Malcolm as the CO was sitting there already evaluating, well, if Roddy's not the one, he's tried for 30, 45 minutes and it's nowhere, maybe we need to shift who the primary is because of something that's been said or something that's happened. And it was always interesting to watch those guys, how they pick who's lead and who's on deck, who's lead and who's on deck.
Yeah, we just try to look at those things every time we get some background on this person and what's going on with them and who's going to be the best. If this was like a country boy kind of person that we're dealing with, which we did sometimes more often when we would go to Marion County or into Georgia or something like that in some of the more remote areas, but we would have like a couple of people that we know this is the person I'm going to put on there to talk to them. I've had times when it was like, this guy is like, he's a super intelligent kind of guy. He's like more of a white collar executive kind of thing. I would have somebody already that I know, this is my go-to right here.
Right, you're just making it getting that first hurdle out of the way, making it easy to establish that rapport. I have a question, and then I really, really want to spend the next 10 minutes on what you're doing currently.
Sure.
I've been assuming all this is on the phone. Is there ever a point where you have visual contact with these folks, or is that something you try to avoid?
Most of it, if it's a dangerous type situation, we try to avoid like actual face-to-face kind of negotiations. Okay. The person's got a gun, they're barricaded with that.
I'm just going back to Clint Eastwood driving the car through the front window. That was my negotiation. I didn't know if you would walk in and talk. My bad, sir. But yeah, I would imagine you don't
seldom
want them
do we
to
do
see.
that.
Yeah.
It happens in other times. It has happened in situations like that, but it's very seldom that kind of thing happens.
You're trying to avoid being a target or body language stuff.
So often it'd be on the phone. Prior to us having like mobile phones being so prevalent, we had throw phones that we still have it could use, but we would actually have it's a throw phone. It's a little phone in a bag that was wired, and we throw it in the window. First, we'd have the SWAT guys break out the window for us, and then have them throw it in the window for us. Yeah.
Don't say anything when you do it either, David. Do it quietly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Here you go.
So we could communicate that way. Also had like a number of speaker boxes that had microphones on them. We could sit outside of a window, and then we could actually talk to them like that. So it's kind of like almost like doing it on like the bullhorn or something like that, or the loudspeaker on the patrol car. But
that's not advantageous.
You're trying to de-escalate a situation by yelling at someone in an extreme volume. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. And if we could put that speaker right outside the window, it's a lot better because you don't have to yell. You have to. If you could do it on the phone, even better.
Right.
Just those other things are kind of more last resort.
And you lose your tone. You lose your ability to be softer and ramp it up. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, what do you do right now? Because we only have about 10 minutes left in the studio. So what are you doing currently as a civilian for the police department?
Yeah, so for Chattanooga Police Department, I do computerized voice stress analysis examinations now. I'm still a licensed polygraph examiner. I did that for many years, about 17 years, I guess, now total. Okay. So when I retired from Chattanooga Police, that job, I was doing polygraph examinations. That job was very specialized. It's requires a lot of training. Basically, it's a year start to finish before you can get a license in the state of Tennessee to actually do polygraph examinations. And the training is pretty extensive. It's several months in residence. There's 13 schools in the country that teach polygraph examination. Last I checked anyway. One of those was in Atlanta, fortunately. So I went to Atlanta, but I had to move to Atlanta for several months.
Wow.
So living down there, it cost the city a lot of money to train me to do that. So
even when you're retired, they're like, no, we're getting our money back. You come still do it.
We kind of had those discussions. David was chief at the time, and we had those discussions. And it was coming up on retirement. And with Chattanooga Police at the time, it's different now, but you hit your full retirement with pretty much everything you could make at 28 years. So when I was coming up on that 28 years, it's like, well, I have this other skill set as well, like having a master's degree in counseling psychology. I've been working part-time in that field for many years, in addition to my law enforcement things. So I'm going to go to work in that full-time, which I did. I worked at Erlanger Behavioral Health Hospital, actually up until 2 days ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've worked there for...
there's all the stories.
I worked there for many years full-time, and then about a year ago I went part-time there. But yeah, totally other story.
Is polygraph pretty accurate?
It's very accurate.
No, I don't like to hear that. No,
it's very accurate. So
let's try that answer again.
So the reason I kept doing the polygraph examinations when I retired is we had some discussions, and they had asked me, well, would you like to stay here as a civilian and continue to do this in a civilian capacity part-time? So we've had several discussions about it and agreed this is the best thing to do. So
initially you were going to come in, and I was going to get you to polygraph me and David. That's initially what I wanted. I wanted us to have.
Nobody wants the results of this.
No, we weren't.
We just met Clint, but I've known David for a lot of years, and that's not going to happen.
We were going to do that, and I was going to come up with all the questions you asked David. Yeah. And since it would have been a surprise, I was going to give you my questions too. So that way, I would have come out squeaky clean.
Would you?
David and I have been friends for many years, and that's not going to happen.
But then we were going to give it to you as well. No, I'm just kidding. Look at everybody's getting scared all of a sudden. We're doing that. How about the voice, the computer voice stress analysis?
Computerized voice stress analysis. All right. So I've been doing polygraph examinations for many years.
Yeah.
Last year sometime, there's a decision made that we're going to transition over to the computerized voice stress analysis. So The concept is sort of the same, but not really. It doesn't do all of the things that a polygraph examination will do. You are looking at this to try and determine truth and deception, but it does it in an entirely different way. The computerized voice stress analysis doesn't require as much training. It actually requires just 1 week of training, and that's it. And there's really not a follow-up training with it. There's no licensing process in Tennessee for computerized voice stress analysis like there was polygraph examinations. So it's much cheaper.
Do you find them working in tandem, like using to confirmation of one versus the other, or do they operate independently?
So it's totally independent.
Okay.
Since I started doing the computerized voice stress analysis last year, I've done very few polygraph examinations, and the confidence is not there on my part in the computerized voice stress analysis. Of course, that comes from a licensed polygraph examiner who, I've done thousands of polygraph examinations. I've done about 50-ish, a little more than 50 computerized voice stress analysis examinations now. And it doesn't do the same things. You can use it to determine like a truth or deception, but not to the same accuracy. I can't put a number on accuracy rates of computerized voice stress analysis examinations. There just isn't research out there on it that could really do that. Whereas a polygraph examination, I can put a number on it. I can tell you that every time, if I can give you a conclusion in a polygraph examination, I can tell you with a minimum of 98% accuracy that I'm absolutely correct.
That's terrifying.
And it's never going to be 100%.
Right.
It's kind of built into the process. Now, there are other times with the polygraph that I would do one and say, I can't give you a result. We call those inconclusive or no opinions. So that's kind of not in that 98% accuracy because I'm not giving you a result at all. I'm just telling you, I don't know. I can't tell you.
What does a polygraph? Is it heart rate? Is it? What are the key the metrics that it is collecting?
So you kind of have to look at the basics of it. So it's based on a concept of the fight or flight response. If you expand that a little bit, it's actually fight, flight, or freeze. We call it F3 in polygraph. So when you look at what the fight or flight response is, these are physiological responses that your body does as a result of being scared or some type of independent stressor being placed on you. Essentially, it's your autonomic nervous system in your body responding to a threat type situation. To look at it in the simplest terms, you could say, like if you're driving down the road in a car pulls out in front of you, you're almost involved in a wreck. You feel that. You have that fight or flight reaction. You notice it. You feel your heart start beating, like thumping hard in your chest. You may notice some respiratory changes. You might start breathing different. Take a deep breath, all of a sudden stop breathing. Some of these respiratory changes, you notice sometimes some of the perspiration activity changes, like where you start sweating. You feel like your hands are on the steering wheel and they're gripping it, but you feel sweaty all of a sudden.
Right.
Those things. Those are the physiological reactions that you have as a fear reaction to some type of stressor. So we apply that to the polygraph process by looking for the threat of a question that I would ask you in the polygraph examination. So normally you wouldn't think of a question in terms of being like, oh, this question threatens me, it scares me, or anything like that. The way your body sees the question as being a threat would be, if you thought about a question, you thought, I'm going to be deceptive to this. I'm going to lie about this question. I'm going to withhold information in this area. Your body automatically sees that as being a threat. So when that question is asked, you have a threat reaction to that question, totally beyond your mental control. Now we look at it to smaller degrees, like in what you would say, like talking about you're almost involved in a wreck or something. Those are large reactions. Those are big things that you could really feel. A lot of the things we look at with the polygraph are smaller reactions that you wouldn't really even know. You couldn't feel yourself start sweating all of a sudden.
Right.
But the computer can pick those things up, right?
Yeah.
Breathing changes. Sometimes it's not things you would even notice, but the computer picks those up. So it does look at those. It looks at cardiovascular activity as a whole, which is kind of a pulse rate, blood pressure, blood volume, a number of things like that combined.
Or psychopaths, can they get through this pretty easy?
No,
That's
not
what
at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah, not at all.
You're just killing all of my criminal mind stuff, dude.
Yeah,
So
some people, they think that, and that's some of the stuff you see out there on the internet.
It's what I've saw in all the Law and Order shows. What are you talking about?
Yeah. So a person who is totally psychotic, totally out of touch with reality, has nothing no concept of what's going on, you can't do a polygraph with them. Absolutely.
Yeah.
They can't beat the polygraph. You just simply can't do it.
Because there's no, I'm assuming their baseline is crazy.
Yeah,
There's really,
yeah.
Did you have a cheeseburger? He's eating it in front of you and you're like, no.
Yeah, to put it in
yes,
basic terms, those are his baseline things. And you can't do any type of polygraph with that. Yeah. So
Okay.
the computer voice stress analysis, it's based on that same concept of the fight or flight response, but it only measures one thing. It measures voice wave patterns. And essentially how that works, your voice operates on an FM frequency and an AM frequency. If you're faced with a threat situation like that, fight or flight response kicks in and the FM frequency automatically drops out of your voice and the AM frequency becomes more prevalent. And that's it. Now, the interesting thing is, if we looked back and said, physiological reactions of polygraph, why does your heart rate change? Why does your breathing things change? Why do you have the perspiration? We can tell you physiologically, this is why. This is why. Your pulse rate changes, your blood flow changes, because you need more blood right then. You've got that fight or flight response. Not necessarily to just thinking like, well, it's because this question threatens me, but if anything threatens you, it's like, my body needs more things right now. You might have like those butterfly feelings in your stomach. Essentially what that is the blood rushing out of your stomach all of a sudden to go to other parts of your body that needs that blood right then. The thing with the computer voice stress analysis, they will tell us that your voice wave patterns do change. The FM frequency drops out. The AM frequency becomes more prevalent as a result of some type of threat, but we have no idea why.
Which is limiting. At that point, it becomes limiting.
Yeah, and these were the things I was told when I went to get certified as a computerized voice stress analysis last year. Yeah.
I hate to do this because the studio is rented after us, and it was on me. I talked a little too much in pregame. That's my fault. But I do want to ask you two things, and it can be short answers. One is, have you found this job has helped you or hurt you when it comes to trusting people when you first meet them? Because I already know this about David a little bit, what he's gone through, but you're like on steroids with this because you're constantly engaged with deceit and trying to figure it out. Right. Is it easy now for you to, when you're talking to somebody, going, bullshit?
Yeah. Yeah. So earlier on, when I was a base patrolman and that kind of thing, I didn't trust anybody. If they weren't a cop and they didn't have a badge, I was not going to trust them.
Right.
That was just the way it is. Yeah. Now, I've done this other part of it and the mental health part of it for so long, and the polygraph and the truth verification part of it for so long. Yeah, I think I'm awesome at actually doing that.
That would drive me.
When I just come in and talk to somebody.
But to have that skill set would drive me insane because now I can't turn it off.
Yeah,
I'm like listening to somebody going.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm pretty good at it. I mean, I can't quantify it. I can give you a number if I did a polygraph examination, but I feel like I know. Yeah.
Next time I buy a car, I'm bringing Malcolm with me.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
So you're saying this is the best you can do?
Yes,
right.
Malcolm.
Yeah, absolutely. Hold on.
No, he doesn't believe you.
Let me grab his wrist real quick and close
Malcolm
his eyes.
doesn't believe you.
No, he's completely
You're all
lying.
AM at this moment, sir. I'm not buying a word you're saying. Go back and talk to your
AM
manager.
frequency.
Go talk to your sales manager.
All right, my last question.
Yeah.
Is there a movie or are there movies or TV shows that have used any negotiating components that you think that's pretty accurate?
You said no, Farley.
Yeah, not that I've ever seen.
They're all out of whack.
You were talking before about, you told me no, you're not supposed to tell me no. Well, true. We don't ever say no for the most part to somebody if we're doing negotiations, but we don't say yes either. Yeah.
How disappointing.
We're just here to shatter you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Every time you bring somebody in, so when you go around the corner with the gun like this, they're like, yeah, that's total stupid. You shouldn't do that. I'm like, dadgummit.
Yeah.
I mean, Mark mirroring it off John Wick. What are you talking about?
Yeah, so a lot of those things, fortunately, the movies don't have negotiation techniques. Like, they don't really know. They don't understand it.
Yeah. To be
they're
fair,
doing it for drama.
It'd be a 12-hour
for drama.
Not for outcome.
It'd be a 12-hour movie.
Yeah.
If you really
Very
used
boring.
everything they did, it'd be like, okay, 4 hours into this movie, they're still talking to this guy.
Yeah. And I can say one of the things we did as the negotiation team in our training days, anytime some new movie would come out, we knew it had something like that, we would watch it.
Oh.
That we did that. We set aside like, okay, 2 hours this day, we're going to watch this movie because this movie is what this guy thinks we're going to do.
Okay.
So we want to know what that movie is.
There's a Netflix series, and unfortunately we do have to go. There's a Netflix series that only had 2 seasons, and I do not know why it did not have more. It's called Criminal Minds.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
I've seen bits of it. Yeah, I don't really watch police-related shows that much anymore.
It actually
honestly.
talks about how the negotiating team of the FBI started, and it's got some truisms built into it. But the reason I think you might, if you ever watch it again, the mistakes you were talking about, making yourself visible or bringing somebody to the scene, the very first episode, that backfires horribly.
Yeah.
So when you said that, I was like, well, by golly, maybe they got it kind of right, because they brought somebody to the scene and it went the opposite direction of what they wanted.
Exactly.
It mirrored your worst outcome.
I'm sure
Now
some
this-
episode they shot somebody in the leg
Yeah.
instead of what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Just
whatever.
Shoot him in the
Shoot him
leg.
in the
How many
leg.
times have you heard that? Why don't you just shoot him in the
shoot
leg?
gun out of his hand.
Shoot-
Good idea.
Absolutely. Let me get the sniper that has. I'm not even a police officer, and that kind of stuff makes me frustrated. But I do shoot guns, and I know that I'd better throwing my gun at people most of the time.
Stories.
Most of the time. Malcolm, I know you're busy. This has been really fun.
Yeah,
I
thanks.
really
Thanks for having me in. I
appreciate it.
really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
it's
And
good.
then if you ever come up with other stories that come back on working with David and you want to share them, he doesn't have to be here. Me and you just jump on a podcast.
I'll give you a call.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
there's
sir.
plenty of things there we didn't get to today.
I would love that. Bye, David.
Okay, good to see you.
Thanks for finding the Crimecast podcast. Do us a favor. If you're listening on Apple, leave us a review and a rating. Helps us grow the podcast. Wherever you're listening, we really appreciate it. Share with your friends. Subscribe to us. Check back in. Come grow with us as we learn how to do this Crimecast podcast thing.